Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Gretchen, and today I am here with a reading recap or wrap up, and it has been a very long time since I have done one of these. It has been a crazy few months, and although I have kept up with reading, there have been a lot of things going on with life in general that have prevented me from sitting down and taking the time to put these videos together. But now I am at a point again where I can start to dedicate time to those again, and I'm certainly not going to talk about all of the books that I have covered since the last time I did one of these videos. So I figured I would just cover the last week or so and talk about the recent books that I have finished, as well as the ones that I am actively reading. And I will say that I'm not really going to be talking too much about any of the Booker books that I have finished. I have finished a few of those in the last week or so, and I do individual reviews for those, so there's really no need to talk about those in depth. I'm really hoping that once I can get over the hump of getting one more of these out into the universe, that I can get on a regular schedule again and hopefully start to put out videos like this on a more routine schedule. I do like the idea of having shorter videos where I'm just talking about a handful of books instead of having those long wrap-ups where I'm talking about everything that I've read in a month, and I feel like it gives me more time to focus a little more in depth on the books that I'm reading. But when you get a book wrap-up or a wrap-up video that you're having to talk about 30 books, it makes it very difficult to give you a lot of information about them. So I will try to do better to get videos like this out more often and on a more regular cadence. The first one that I want to talk about, I no longer have the copy of it. I have finished The Wedding People by Alison Espach, and this was a very surprising book for me. This was on one of my anticipated releases videos a few months back, and I will say that even though I was anticipating it, it was kind of one of those books that I didn't really hold up a lot of faith in. I thought it was going to be one of those feel-good book that was kind of not really going to teach me anything or be anything that was super memorable, and I was wrong. I really did find myself enjoying this book. So this book follows our main character. Her name is Phoebe, and she's in her 40s, and she is a professor, and her husband is a professor as well. And she, at one point in time in their marriage, they are having a conversation, and she stumbles upon this resort in Newport, and her and her husband make these grand plans to someday visit that resort together and do all of these sorts of things. And we then find out that they are at a turning point in their marriage, and Phoebe takes this very hard, and she decides that she is going to go and stay at this very exclusive and expensive resort, and she has a plan of what she is going to do to move forward. Once she gets to the hotel, she realizes that it could probably be the worst place for somebody that is going through what Phoebe's going through, because she is in the midst of this huge, elaborate, and extravagant wedding that is being planned for the entire week. And she is, of course, like immediately repulsed by this idea, and she just wants to avoid everyone. And then what eventually happens is she meets up with the bride, and they start to develop this bit of a friendship and this connection. And then the book kind of takes off from there, and I'm not going to give any more of the plot away. Now, this book has elements of predictable plot points, and I'm not going to judge the book based on that. I think sometimes it is very difficult to write books like this without having some level of predictability to it. But what I will say is I think that Espach did a really good job of of making it as surprising as possible. And I also love the fact that this doesn't necessarily mean that it is a fluffy, feel-good all the way through kind of novel. This is a novel that is going to talk about some dark things. It's going to talk about some happy things, and it was funny. For as uncomfortable as the subject matter was at times, the author really did manage to let her humor shine through, and I really felt myself cheering the character on. It ended up being extremely satisfying in the end. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was fast-paced and entertaining and funny, and it was heartwarming, and it was devastating, and I thought that there was a lot of depth to it that I was not expecting, and it ended up being a very surprising read for me. The next book that I want to talk about is another one that I recently finished, and I really enjoyed my time with it. It's a real quick read, and it's called The Employees by Olga Ravn, and this is a book that is translated. It's translated from the Danish by Martin Aiken, and this was actually a book that was shortlisted for the International Booker a few years ago. And this is a book that's sci-fi. I don't read a whole lot of sci-fi, but this is exactly the type of sci-fi that I like to read when I decide to pick up that genre. This is a book that is also set up in a very interesting format. It is taking place as a series of statements that were obtained during interviews with the crew of this ship that is called the 6000 ship. And there is a planet called New Discovery, and in those interviews there are both humanoid and human crew members, and they are introduced to objects from New Discovery, and part of the interview process is to see how the humans and the humanoids are interacting with those objects, how they connect with those objects, as well as the room that the interview is taking place. And as we start the novel, it starts with statements, like I said, but the statements don't go in order, and the author is purposely presenting these statements in this particular order. And as these interviews start, they start out very innocuous, and as we start to progress, we start to notice that there are strange things happening, and we notice that there is tension between the humans and the humanoids, and eventually we start to hear kind of like all of the dirty laundry unfold, and it eventually leads to something. And I don't want to give much more of the plot away. Now, the book honestly is not really too plot-based because this is based on interviews, so you're not following one standard character or group of characters. Every page is from a different perspective, so reading something like this is always fun for me because you get to piece together the puzzle, and I really liked that about this novel, and it made it very engaging for me. The fact that it is in vignettes as well, you'll have very short chapters or statements that are just a few lines long, and then you'll have ones that are a little longer. That really made this book fast-paced for me, and each one was interesting in its own way. I just thought it was fantastic. I really thought that it was a fun ride. I can definitely see this as a Booker book. It has Booker written all over it, actually, in my opinion. And yeah, I loved the dichotomy of your humanoids and your humans, and, you know, pondering the differences between the two, and pondering what our future could look like if our technology continues to progress the way that it is. And yeah, it was just a really fun read, and I enjoyed every minute of it. So another book that I recently finished that I no longer have a copy of is called The Ministry of Time. I think her name is Kaliane Bradley. If I pronounced that first name wrong, I am so sorry. But this was a book that was on my anticipated releases a few months ago. I was looking forward to it. It sounded like it was going to be a fun, comical time travel book with a little bit of romance splashed in there. And although it did have time travel and it did have romance, I just didn't feel like this book was giving me comedy like it promised, and that did dampen my enjoyment of this book. So basically, this book follows our main character, and she has a job at the ministry, and she is what is referred to as a bridge. It's set in the near future, and she is basically somebody that is assigned person from some historical significance from the past and is trying to acclimate them to the current day, to kind of see how that transition happens and to see if they can adapt and adjust to this world through that time travel. And she is assigned to a man that was part of the original Arctic expedition from the 1800s. I can't remember the exact date, but she is attached to this man, and they have kind of a fraught, weird relationship at first, but then, and this isn't a spoiler, it does turn or blossom into a little bit of a romance, having them being in such close proximity with each other, and him basically being completely dependent on her to guide him in this new world that he is very much a stranger in. And I thought that when I read the synopsis that sounded like it could be such a hysterical and funny read, but it was way more somber and dark than I was expecting it to be. And I thought that at first it was just me, maybe not picking up on the subtlety of the humor, but if any of you have watched my channel before, you'll realize that I really like to read the physical book as I listen along to the audiobook. And the audiobook, the narration also felt very cold and somber, and I wasn't hearing those inflections in the voices of, you know, it being something that was being comedically timed. It just felt very sorrowful and sad and slow, and although it did have its moments that made me chuckle, I was expecting way more comedy, and instead I got a book that felt way more serious in tone than I was expecting, and that was a little jarring for me. And I feel like if I had gone into that book knowing that it really wasn't going to be that level of comedy that I was expecting, I probably would have approached it differently and would have maybe enjoyed it a little more. Time travel is not a new subject in sci-fi books, and I don't feel like this book really did anything groundbreaking on the subject. I will say I did enjoy the characters, but I just don't think that this really lived up to my expectation. I was kind of hoping for something a little more quirky, a little more unique, and I felt like this could be, you know, just any run-of-the-mill time travel book, and it really didn't surprise me. The ending didn't surprise me at all. The only thing that really did surprise me, like I said, was I was expecting a different type of tone with the book than I ended up getting in the end. So I honestly can't say that I would recommend this book. I certainly don't feel like I gained anything by reading it. It wasn't my least favorite book by any means, and I did enjoy my time with it. I just know there are so many good books out there that I have been wanting to get to from this year, and I'm kind of disappointed I prioritized that over some other ones that I have really been wanting to get to as well. So, but I'm still glad that I read it. So for those of you that don't know, I am very much a mood reader. I don't typically do TBR videos because I can never commit to them. And even with best intentions, I never end up following through with them. So I don't like to put that out into the universe. But this time of year, especially October and November, I get in the mood to read those fall, cozy, kind of witchy, spooky, horror type books. The ones that really fit the mood of the season. And if anything, I am a mood reader, but I am very much a seasonal reader where I get in moods for certain books. And at the beginning of fall this year, I did go through my bookshelves and make a pile of books that I really wanted to get to, that to me really felt like autumnal reads. And one of those I just finished this past week, and that is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Bradbury. I honestly can't believe that I have not picked this book up yet in my life. I am a fan of Bradbury. I love Fahrenheit 451, and I'm also a huge fan of his short stories. I think he was a master at the short story, and I don't know how I've made it this long in my life without picking this one up. And this book is, I don't think there's probably too many people out there that aren't familiar with this story, but basically it follows our main characters. We have two young boys. They are on the cusp of turning 14, and one late October day, there is this creepy carnival that just kind of pops up in their town, and the book then talks about them visiting this carnival and all of the creepy things that happen to them while they're there, and then not just with them at the carnival, but how the carnival impacts the rest of the town in general, and how it affects the lives of not only these two boys, but some of the citizens in the town as well. And it's a little dark, it's definitely sinister in tone, and it's not any type of horror book that is going to keep someone up at night, I don't think. But if I read this as a 13 or 14-year-old, it would definitely be something that creeped me out and gave me a lot to think about. It also, to me, kind of drudged up a lot of feelings of nostalgia for me remembering what it was like to be a kid at that age and being scared and being kind of mesmerized by this time of year and Halloween and ghost stories. And it also gave me really big, and I'm sure that this book was an inspiration for the movie Halloween Town, but it gave me a lot of Halloween Town vibes as well. And it just, like I said, kind of conjured up all of those childhood memories for me. So this was a pretty fun read. It's also a fast-paced read. It looks kind of thick, but it really is just over, I think it's just over 200 pages. And this copy is actually kind of cool because the book ends and then it goes to a history, context, and criticism section about the book, which was really interesting to read as well. I love when books will continue the story or give you something extra to enjoy, to dig a little deeper into the book. So yeah, I'm really glad I finally got to this one. And if you're looking for a great read during spooky season, if you haven't picked this one up, I think this would definitely fit the bill for you. And the last book that I want to talk about is one that I literally finished right before I started filming this video, and that is The Mysteries of Pittsburgh by Chabon. So I specifically read this book for a reading challenge. The October prompt was to read a book that takes place where you live, and I live in the Pittsburgh area, so this was a perfect choice for me. I have never read any books by Chabon before, and I believe that this was his first novel, if I'm not mistaken. This book is a coming-of-age story. It is set obviously in Pittsburgh, and it's set in, I think, the mid to late 80s. I'm not sure of the the exact date, but I think that that's when it is set. And it follows our main character, and his name is Arthur, or Art. And Art is in his early 20s, and he is, you know, on that cusp of real adulthood where he is trying to figure out who he is. He's trying to figure out exactly where his life is going to go. He's confused. He's kind of in flux. And he had a challenging childhood. He has a fraught relationship with his father. He lost his mother at a very young age. And he also has struggled with internal questions about his sexuality. When he was in his early teens, he had thought that maybe he was gay. Then he eventually decided that he wasn't because he found that he was attracted to women, and he just pushed those thoughts out of his mind. One day he becomes thrust into a world of new people, and these very eccentric and lively characters become a part of his life. And one of them is a woman that goes by the name of Floxy, and he ends up in a relationship with her. But then he also meets this man named Art as well, and Art is really starting to stir up all of those feelings that he had before as a young boy, making Art question his sexuality, and he has to come to terms with, you know, who he is and, you know, make those realizations. And this is definitely a coming of age story set a little later in life. So we're not talking about adolescence. We're talking about that coming of age going into, like I said, real adulthood. And this book really did a great job of doing that. It was a very complex story, and there were a lot of great characters, and there was a lot of funny things that were going on. There were a lot of sad things that were happening, and a lot of the feelings and emotions that he went through are very relatable. You know, what are you going to do with your life? Where are you going to end up? And what is all of this leading to? And it was a very interesting read, and I'm really glad to have finally picked it up. But of course, my favorite part of this book was Pittsburgh. And this book, and I don't know if this is just something I noticed because I'm from the area, but it was oozing with Pittsburgh. It is very evident that Michael Chabon is very proud to be a Pittsburgher, and that book shows on every page. It has every street, it has every area, talking about local food, local traditions, local places, the landscape, street names, restaurants, hotels, attractions. It is just filled with a ton of Pittsburgh references, and it was so fun to read a book and know exactly where your characters were standing and know exactly what view he was looking at or what building he was looking at in certain scenes. And if you have never read a book, or if there is a book out there set in your home, I highly recommend seeking it out because it is so much fun to be immersed in a book like that. So I'm really thankful that I read the book. I did enjoy my time with it, and I'm really glad that I had this prompt in this reading challenge to kind of force me to get to this book. It's been on my TBR forever. I don't know why I hadn't got to it sooner, but yeah, I'm really happy I read it, and I did enjoy the story overall. And I honestly feel like I would have enjoyed this book even if it was set somewhere different, but because it was set in Pittsburgh, it made it a better experience for me. All right, so now real quick, I just want to tell you about the books I'm actively reading. I'm not going to give reviews or anything on them or talk too much about them until I'm actually done with them. But one of the other books that I put on my autumn TBR this year, and it's one I've been meaning to get to forever, and I thought, you know what, this is the time. And then I went to the Goodwill and I found this hardcover copy of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell for $3. And I thought, that's a sign. That is absolutely a sign that I have to pick this book up this year. And I had recently started this one. Now, I'm not too far in. I'm only about 120 some pages in, but I am absolutely loving this so far. This has been a book I have been wanting to get to for ages. I love Susanna Clarke's writing, and this is kind of her masterpiece, and I am so looking forward to digging deeper into this story. And for those of you that don't know, this is a book about magic, and we have two magicians, and I don't, obviously not being too far into the book yet, I don't know a lot of the details of the plot, but it is set in kind of an alternate timeline. So back in the 1800s, in the early 1800s, where it's known in England that magic does exist, but it has kind of gone by the wayside, and there are currently no practicing magicians anymore. And then we learn about Mr. Norrell, who lives in the north. He actually does and can still do magic, and he kind of proves that and is trying to get England back into magic again. And that's all I kind of know so far, but I am absolutely loving the writing so far. It's a very enchanting and enthralling story, and I can't wait to get deeper into it. So the next book that I'm reading, I don't have it in front of me, is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. This is a group read that is happening over on Jess at Stalking Kafka's channel. She has a group read for The Moonstone. Now, we're getting toward the end of it if it hasn't ended. I did get a little bit behind with it, so I need to catch up before I start listening to or reading all of the comments about this book, but it's been a lot of fun so far. This book is it's a mystery about a stolen gem, and there's a large cast of really fun characters, and it is a great mystery, and I'm having a lot of fun reading it. I just need to kind of shift focus and get back into it. It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying the story, it's just life kind of got away, but I really am looking forward to jumping back into that one because it was a great story and I really was enjoying my time with it, and I need to get it finished. And then the last one that I want to talk about is Playground by Richard Powers. I am of course reading this for the Booker Prize long list. This is the last book that I have to read from the long list. This didn't make it to the short list, but this was the final book to be released, so I didn't get to it before the short list was announced. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm actually enjoying it a little more than maybe some of the books that made it to the short list, but we can talk about that once I get through with it, and also when I do my single review for this a little later. And yeah, that is what I am reading at the moment. I don't have any plans to start any other books until I get some of those done, but who knows? I'm such a mood reader. I could be reading a different book 20 minutes from now if I walk past it and see it on the shelf and grab it, so who knows? That's the life of a mood reader. But I hope that whatever you guys are reading right now, you're enjoying it. If you have read any of these books and you want to shoot me a comment about your experience with them or your thoughts on them, I would love to hear them. And until we read again, bye!